Imagine standing beneath a cliff so steep that birds seem closer to its summit than humans. Now imagine seeing walls up there, windows, watchtowers, an entire fortress hanging above the world where no road should exist. And then realizing people once carried stone, wood, water, weapons, and entire lives to the top, using only ropes, ladders, and sheer desperation. Throughout history, whenever kingdoms collapsed, whenever armies advanced, whenever the world below became too dangerous, humans did something extraordinary. They climbed. Tonight we journey across 7 ancient fortresses and monasteries built in places so impossible that modern tourists struggle to reach them, even with staircases and safety rails. A monastery balanced on a pillar of rock in the middle of the sky. A fortress hidden inside clouds above the Andes. A castle carved directly into a canyon wall. And in the end, we'll visit the mountain stronghold in Iran, where a secretive order of assassins built a fortress so secure that entire empires feared what was happening inside it. Because when humans run out of safe places on Earth, they start building above it. Some climbed for peace. Others climbed because the world below had become impossible to survive. Our first ascent begins high in the Himalayas of Bhutan. At more than 3,000 meters above sea level, clinging to a vertical cliff face above a forested valley, stands Paro Taktsang, the Tiger's Nest Monastery. From a distance, it does not look real. White temple walls hang directly from black rock. Golden roofs float above empty air. Clouds drift below the monastery itself. According to legend, Guru Padmasambhava flew here in the 8th century on the back of a tigress to meditate inside a cave. And when you finally stand beneath the cliff, you understand why the story sounds supernatural. Because the mountain appears impossible for humans. The path upward winds through forests, stone stairways, and narrow ledges where one wrong step leads hundreds of meters downward into the valley below. Even today, carrying building materials to the monastery is brutally difficult. Now imagine doing it centuries ago. The first temple structures appeared in 1692. Workers carried timber, stone, food, and tools manually up the mountain, using wooden frames strapped to their backs. No roads, no cranes, no machines, only mountain paths and endurance. Fires repeatedly damaged the monastery over the centuries. Yet every time, the Bhutanese rebuilt it again. Because the monastery was never just a building, it was a statement, a declaration that spiritual isolation mattered more than physical comfort. When monks meditate there during storms, thunder rolls through the valley, while clouds swallow the cliffs entirely. And for a few moments, the monastery disappears into the sky itself. But not every fortress above the clouds was built for prayer. Now travel west into southern France. High above the forests of the Pyrenees stands the ruined fortress of Montségur, a castle balanced on a narrow mountain peak, so steep that attacking armies once believed it nearly untouchable. But this was not merely a fortress. It was the final refuge of the Cathars, a religious movement the medieval church declared heretical. In the 13th century, the Cathars fled here after crusading armies swept across southern France, destroying entire cities. Montségur became their final sanctuary. The climb alone exhausted attackers. Supplies had to move up dangerous mountain trails carved into the rock itself. Every stone used to strengthen the fortress had to be dragged upward by hand. And for years, the fortress survived. Then in 1243, thousands of royal troops surrounded the mountain. The siege lasted nearly a year. Winter winds froze soldiers on the slopes while defenders watched from above. Eventually, attackers captured a nearby ridge and positioned siege engines overlooking the fortress. The end became inevitable. But what happened next transformed Montségur into legend. Before surrendering, several Cathars reportedly escaped the fortress during the night, carrying unknown treasures down hidden mountain paths. Some believe they carried gold. Others believe sacred texts. A few legends claim they protected the Holy Grail itself. Nobody knows the truth. Because after the fortress fell, more than 200 Cathars refused conversion and walked willingly into flames at the base of the mountain. Today, only ruins remain above the clouds. Stone walls, broken towers, and silence carried endlessly across the Pyrenees wind. While some climbed mountains to escape armies, others climbed simply to escape the world itself. In western Georgia rises a limestone pillar nearly 40 meters tall. At its summit stands one of the strangest churches on earth. Katskhi Pillar, a monastery literally built on top of a narrow rock column. For centuries, local villagers believed the pillar represented the pillar of life mentioned in Christian tradition. But almost nobody climbed it. The stone walls are nearly vertical. Wind tears across the summit, and from below the structure appears absurdly small against the sky. Archaeologists later discovered monks had already lived there more than 1,000 years ago. How they carried construction materials upward remains partly unknown. Modern climbers installed metal ladders to reach the summit. Ancient monks had ropes. That was all. At the top sits a tiny church, a wine cellar, burial crypts, and monk cells squeezed onto a space barely larger than a small house. Living there meant complete isolation. No crowds, no armies, no distractions. Only stone, wind, and prayer above the earth. Even today, only selected monks may stay atop the pillar overnight, because some places were never meant for ordinary life. They were meant for separation from it. And as kingdoms rose and collapsed below them, isolated monasteries continued appearing in places no ordinary settlement should survive. Now we move to the Black Sea Mountains of Turkey. Hidden inside a sheer cliff nearly 300 meters above a forested gorge stands Sumela Monastery. From below, it looks impossible. A massive complex built directly into the mountain wall itself. According to tradition, 2 Greek monks discovered a sacred icon inside a cave there during the 4th century, and instead of leaving, they built a monastery around it. Generation after generation expanded the structure deeper into the cliff. Stone rooms, libraries, chapels, stairways carved into rock. The mountain itself became part of the architecture. During invasions and political collapse, the monastery survived because reaching it was a nightmare. Fog constantly swallowed the valley. Rain turned mountain paths into death traps, and enemies approaching from below were visible long before they arrived. But survival came at a cost. Everything had to be carried upward manually: food, oil, water, wood, even paint for the monastery's famous frescoes. For over 1,000 years, monks lived suspended above the gorge while waterfalls crashed beside the cliffs. And when clouds rolled across the mountains, the monastery vanished completely, almost like the mountain was hiding it. But even cliffs hidden inside mountains were not isolated enough for some believers. Far out in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the western coast of Ireland, rises a jagged island of stone, Skellig Michael. The island looks less like a place humans should live, and more like the remains of a drowned mountain clawing back above the sea. Waves slam against vertical cliffs, storm winds scream across the rock, and seabirds cover the sky. Yet sometime around the 6th century, monks climbed onto this island and built a monastery near its summit. Nobody knows exactly how many died building it. The stone stairways alone are terrifying. Hundreds of uneven steps rise directly beside cliffs, dropping into the Atlantic Ocean. The monks built small beehive-shaped stone huts, using dry stone construction without mortar. Every stone had to be carried by hand up slippery cliffs exposed to freezing wind. There was no fresh farmland, very little shelter, and almost complete isolation from the mainland. So why choose such a place? Because isolation was the goal. The further they moved from ordinary civilization, the closer they believed they came to God. Today, visitors climbing the ancient stairways often stop halfway from exhaustion. The monks climbed them every day for generations. Across the world, isolation became its own form of protection. Now we cross into North America. Hidden inside canyon walls in present-day Colorado lies Cliff Palace, the largest cliff dwelling ever built in North America. From a distance, the settlement is almost invisible. Stone buildings blend directly into the canyon wall beneath a massive rock overhang. The ancestral Pueblo people built the city during the 12th century. More than 150 rooms, ceremonial chambers, storage areas, homes suspended above the canyon floor. To reach the settlement, inhabitants climbed ladders carved into cliffs and narrow footholds cut into stone. Defenders above could easily repel attackers below. But protection was only part of the reason. The overhanging cliff also shielded the city from snow, rain, and desert heat. The architecture worked with nature instead of fighting it. And then, the city was abandoned. By the late 13th century, the people vanished from the cliffs. Drought, conflict, resource collapse. Historians still debate the exact reason, but the silence they left behind remains unsettling. Empty stone windows still stare across the canyon exactly as they did hundreds of years ago, waiting. But none of these strongholds were feared quite like the fortress hidden deep within the mountains of Persia. Alamut Castle, the Eagle's Nest. Built atop a narrow ridge surrounded by steep valleys, the fortress looked almost unreachable from below, and in the 11th century, it became headquarters of the Nizari Ismailis under Hassan I Saba. The man European legends later transformed into the Old Man of the Mountain. Enemies claimed assassins emerged from Alamut, carrying out impossible missions across the Middle East. Some stories were exaggerated, others terrifyingly real. The fortress itself was brilliantly positioned. Only one narrow path reached the entrance. Water systems hidden inside the mountain allowed defenders to survive long sieges. Gardens and storage chambers reduced dependence on outside supply lines. And because the castle sat high above surrounding valleys, approaching armies could be seen from enormous distances away. For nearly 2 centuries, powerful empires failed to destroy it. Then came the Mongols. In 1256, Hulagu Khan's armies surrounded Alamut. The Mongols specialized in destroying civilizations. Cities burned across Asia before them. Even Alamut could not survive forever. When the fortress finally fell, Mongol forces destroyed libraries containing countless manuscripts. And with them disappeared knowledge historians may never recover. Today only ruins remain above the cliffs, broken stone overlooking endless mountains. But the legend survived. Because Alamut represented something larger than war. It represented humanity's eternal belief that somewhere high enough, hidden enough, isolated enough. There exists a place the world cannot reach. Different civilizations, different centuries, different reasons for climbing impossible heights. Yet every one of these places reveals the same truth. 7 fortresses, 7 impossible refuges, 7 reminders that when fear, faith, or survival become strong enough, humans will build anywhere, on pillars of stone, inside cliffs, above oceans, across volcanic peaks. Because history is not only the story of empires rising, it is also the story of people running from them. And perhaps the strangest part is this: most of these places were built without modern machinery. No helicopters, no engines, no steel cranes, only ropes, hands, and determination stronger than gravity itself. We often imagine ancient humans as primitive. But primitive people do not build monasteries above clouds. They do not carve cities into canyon walls. They do not create water systems atop desert mountains. These structures still stand because the people who built them understood stone, landscape, and survival better than we expect. And when you stand below these impossible fortresses, staring upward at walls balanced above empty air, one question always returns: not why they built there, but how badly they must have needed to. If this journey through humanity's impossible strongholds fascinated you, subscribe to the channel, because there are still places on Earth so extreme, so isolated, and so dangerous that even history struggles to reach them.